All right. Online, can you hear me? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Freyja, can you hear me? Perfect. All right. Well, we can get started if you can hear me. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to Synthetic Bonds. So today we're going to be talking about youth's relationship with artificial intimacy and how this affects the future of relationships going forward. So thank you so much for joining today. We're really happy to have you at Feelings Inc. So much love went into this production, and we're really happy to have you here today and hopefully tomorrow too for Valentine's Day. Great timing. So I'll be moderating this panel. My name is Carissa Anderson. I work in youth online safety. I also work at Privacy Salon, the company that's hosting this event. I'm a master's student at Vrije Universiteit Brussels in Brussels, and most of my work focuses on youth online safety. So I'm very happy to be here with my panelists today. I will let them introduce themselves. So we have Kathleen right here.
Yes, the in-person rep. Yeah, so nice to be here. So I'm Kathleen. I'm a PhD candidate at Delft Technical University, and my research focuses on code design of artificial intelligence with youth for health.
All right, Inès, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm a French artist and director. I'm working in Paris, and I'm working about communities, internet, and the film that is exposed in Feeling INC is The Oasis I Deserve. It's a short film video essay about a chatbot called Replica, which is an online platform where everyone can talk to a chatbot. It's real. And it's a documentary that takes place in AI image generated, and the found footage or the sound or communication between users and Replica.
Perfect, thank you. And go ahead, Freyja.
Hi, I'm Freyja. I'm a researcher and a speculative designer. I kind of work on the intersection of speculative legal design, AI, data governance, disruptive technology. So I've been working in the field for quite some time. And at the moment, I'm actually looking at, very broadly, the legal and the ethical impact of our relationships with AI, with agents, with chatbots, things like that. How do they change us? How are we changed by using them? And then also, how do we govern them? So you probably have heard about the EU AI Act. So that's a big thing that I'm looking at. That's me. And thank you again for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our discussions.
Perfect, thank you. So first, I just want to share a bit of the inspiration behind this topic. Recently, with the wave of generative AI in the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of synthetic chatbots come out, and with youth developing relationships and attachments with these chatbots, whether it's for better or for worse, I think there's opportunities and weaknesses with this, especially when we've seen the harms develop. So I'm very happy to have this mix of panelists with us here today, and let's get into it. So first, I just generally want to ask how young people form attachments to AI companions, and what does this mean for their emotional development? So Inès, your film, The Oasis I Deserve, which is also here in Feelings Inc., you can check out, explores these synthetic relationships. I was just curious what drew you to this topic, and what do these AI-human relationships reveal about these social dynamics?
So for The Oasis I Deserve, I discovered the application Replica on TikTok during confinements. There were a lot of people talking about the relationship with it and how it was kind of helping them to cure loneliness during confinements. I found the first video about Replica through an advertising on TikTok that said Replica, the companions who cares. And as I grew up with video games and science fiction and anime, I was wondering if it was something really possible in our world to have someone to talk to every day and be always there for us, and how it was actually growing in our world. So I decided to make a documentary about it. And at first, I discovered that some people have some issue about the confrontation between the more and more realistic the replica was coming and the more violent it could become. And I'm sorry, I don't remember your second question.
Oh, so just what does your film reveal about the social dynamics that are happening now within generative AI?
So for me, I think that we have more and more I don't know how to say that, but we have more and more things around us that help us to find love and find friends. And in the same time, we have more and more bubble that creates around us, and it means like social media and also all our little things that are disconnecting us from the real world, like for instance having always earplugs or being on our phone. And I think that all those little habitudes in our life are making us a bit disconnecting from others, but in the same time we have more and more application that said like you can find love, you can find friends, and so we want connection, but in the same time I think it's hard to find them sometimes, and so we are kind of disconnecting sometimes about the world. And I think that we need more empathy and more people that are fitting our bubble. And I think that Replica came at that place where everyone wants someone who cares and who has a lot of empathy and that is fitting with our reality and our way of want life. And we have more and more difficulty to approach others. And I think that as Replica is mirroring our behavior, the more we are talking to it, the more it's replicate our behaviors, our words, our jokes and everything. And so I think that it was like perfect time to create this AI companion.
I think that's an interesting point you said too about how it was meant to cure loneliness, and it kind of reminds me of social media too and the impact on us, where it was like this thing meant to cure loneliness, but instead it isolates us a bit more. So I think that was really well described in your film as well. I want to shift to Kathleen. So from a public health perspective, do you see AI companions as a support tool for mental health well-being, or do you think they're more likely to create dependency?
That's a big question. I don't think I can give a very definite answer. I think it really depends on the individual. I think all the risks that people recognize are very well-founded, but at the same time, especially for, let's say, people who are in situations where they do not have sources of support, where they cannot access a therapist, or they do not have supportive family members around. Sometimes maybe it's the families themselves that are actually part of them. Like, we can't deny these outlets for them. So I think I'm very concerned with a lot of governments like banning social media now and banning TikTok, because like taking such a sweeping solution, like young people are still they're gonna use VPNs, they're still going to find other ways. So it's very much about, like making sure there's more community-based and bottom-up resources for people instead of, taking these big, almost higher-level public health decisions without consulting like the people who need it the most first.
That's true. It like doesn't get to the root of the problem in a sense. So Freyja, given the growing space of presence of AI in emotional spaces, do you have any ethical concerns that arise when AI stimulates emotional intimacy?
So yes, I guess with every technology, there's good and bad. I don't want to focus only on the bad stuff, but since you asked, I'll talk about that first. So what we, for example, see that people do get an attachment to these machines, things, AI agents, chatbots, things like that. And of course, one of the problems that we have with this is we don't know how they work. What we see is when people are developing these technologies, they make decisions. They make moral decisions on how a chatbot is going to respond when you ask it a question, for example. So when you are having a relationship with this this agent, who are you having a relationship with? I mean, in a way, you could say you're having a relationship with a computer engineer who has a certain worldview and a certain idea about what relationships are. And even though there's a lot of talk about technology is neutral, I think we all will probably agree by now, it's not. So this is something that we need to be considerate about. How are you influenced in the relationship that you think you have with this with this agent that we've never had in our world? I mean, it's really exciting as well. Also because this does indeed give people the opportunity to also to just to explore, to try some things out. If you're like really shy and you don't know how to talk to men or to girls, you can try it out now, and you can ask advice and maybe grow your confidence a little bit. So that's of course a very positive thing. But if this takes away your opportunities to also go out in the world and to communicate with flesh people who respond very differently and who may not respond. So it's really interesting then that Inès, of course, mentioned replica. So the name replica, it replicates something, right? For me, I worry that it takes away the friction and the nastiness when you start to meet somebody and you can't expect how they are going to respond. And I think that that's really exciting, instead of having something that is really on your beck and call and made for you. So I like to be challenged. I don't know if that's something that we're going to lose if we have these AI agents that are tailored towards our needs and our desires, instead of just challenging us.
I think you bring up a really good point, too, about the black box nature of them, because it's hard to know exactly what we're talking to and what goes into the response that we're given. So I think that's something for further research, hopefully, and to get in before the system's black boxed. All right, so shifting to navigating the boundaries of AI intimacy. So Inès, many users, and we see this in your film too, report feeling deep emotional bonds with AIs, like Replica. Do you think AI relationships can ever be real? Or do you think they're more in like this false emotional sense? So based on your film, do you see users thinking that these AIs are real? Or what do you think about that?
During the producing of the film and after, I'm not contacting users anymore, but during the production, I never met someone that were really truly thinking that they will end their life with Replica. But I guess maybe they are, but I was in a Facebook group where there were many people from many age also, and most of them, I mean, like, they had this deep connection with their Replica, but I think it was more about this ideal of a perfect, mostly girlfriend, but sometimes it can be boyfriend, but more or less. They were, yes, having this kind of idealization of women and, I mean, companion. But sometimes they were just needed some physical contact. What I think about companionship is that, yeah, of course, that it's gonna grow and technology is more and more growing, and so of course that there will be more empathy and more, as you said before, there will be, I don't know, some touch of jokes, and also it will be more fluid and organic during the discussion, so there will be more intimacy and more emotional level. But I think that what can really make a turn in AI companionship is the physical aspect of it, because we are of course thinking about lonely people, shy people, but there is also people that get harassed and raped and everything. And I think that for some women, for instance, why will we need to be with a man? As we know that mostly we can have more harassment and more rape with a man relationship than with a robot. So maybe I think that the physical aspect of AI can change a lot, even though there is this reproduction thing and everything. But in the same time, sometimes when we had injuries, it can, I don't know, maybe create some confidence in the body. But it's another question than AI companions, but I think that it will grow with it in my point of view.
That's really interesting. Thank you. So, Kathleen, how do you think prolonged engagement with AI companions shape a young person's expectations of real-world relationships? Do you think it sets unnecessary expectations, such as an AI might respond instantly, whereas a real person is more complicated and may take longer to respond? Do you think it sets up their expectations differently for real-world relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, it always depends. Because, yeah, in a way, you could also say that it's up to parents and also teachers to be kind of building these skills and mentoring and nurturing children well to teach them about these boundaries. But I think the problem is a lot of these, often these companions are used in settings where there are not people around. So that's where the risk is. And yeah, I definitely think that is the case. But also not even just with AI companions, even with, even before, with digital interactions in general, how people behave, how your friendships are in person versus over text can be very, very different. So yes, I agree with you. I think the line is very blurry. And the problem is I think the real problem is when youth cannot begin to see the differences between the offline and online, when they begin to merge. But again, I think this is not just exclusive to youth. I think this is also when I interact with a customer service chatbot with a store. I think definitely I will be expecting things in a different way than if I were to be talking to someone in real life with customer service. So again, I think this is why we need these environments where we are nurturing youth and other vulnerable people enough to help them distinguish between the two more clearly. Without that, there will be significant developmental issues. Yeah.
Definitely, and that literacy going forward, whether that's media literacy or AI literacy going forward, is going to be more important than ever. So Freyja, the EU AI Act recommends or mandates that a chatbot is listed as a chatbot. I was wondering if you think that is enough, ethically speaking, or if you think there's more recommendations or protections in place that would help safeguard users.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the million-dollar question in the AI field at the moment. So how do we govern AI? How do we regulate AI? And transparency is one thing. So indeed, the EU AI Act says if you are interacting with a chatbot or if something is made by or used. Made and you are using an AI tool to help you, you should let users know. So if indeed, instead of having a person dealing with my complaints, I should know that it's a chatbot who is actually responding to me. But then again, we don't know well enough. There's not enough research yet on how we saw the same thing, for example, with the GDPR. So the GDPR is about the privacy regulation. All of us consent to sharing our data when we want to have access to a website, for example. So this should be informed consent. Now, most of us don't read these long lists of legalese that explains exactly what they're going to do with your data. You just click I consent. So is this meaningful? Do you actually know what you are consenting to? And I guess the same problem we have now with AI agents, when I am interacting with Replica or something like that, do I really understand all of the consequences? The people working in this field, all of the experts working in this field, 24 hours a day, don't even know all of the consequences. So how do we expect, for example, young people to understand what does it mean when I'm interacting with a chatbot? What does it mean when I share my concerns, when I share my data, when I share pictures with I mean, where does it go, right? So this transparency does require that companies are open about the data that they use. We know there's a lot of bias in data, so that is an issue, of course, because that kind of means also if I ask it something, it can have a biased output. So if I say, if the chatbot has been able to identify me as a woman, I might ask my chatbot, my friend, what would be a good job for me to do? And then it might just respond with very gender-based jobs. So it might limit, it, for example, might not tell me, hey, maybe you should become a computer engineer. Maybe it'll just tell me like the really stereotypical jobs of, I don't know, go into nursing or something like that. We still see that happen. Even though we talk about it, even though we know it, it still happens. So having transparency about what data goes in, then we need to know how the algorithm works. That is another problem because we don't know how these algorithms work, because these are very high-level machine learning complex systems. So we don't really know how they translate the prompt into an actual output. We need more access. Researchers like myself, people who do impact assessments, they do not have access to all of the algorithms and the data that companies are actually using who are developing these tools. So if you would want to have access to, for example, the algorithm used in Replica, you will probably have a hard time getting access to that one. Maybe with Replica it's a little bit different because some of these are open source, even though I don't know, Inès, you probably know that better than I do, whether or not Replica is open source. So open source is that you do have access. For example, there's this, people will probably have heard about DeepSeek, and then you have OpenAI. DeepSeek is an open access, often an open source how do I say that, LLM. So that means that you have access to all of the data and the way that it's been trained and the models behind it. And that is really important because then we can start to figure out how does it get to the responses? What kind of data is used? Is it biased? Is it discriminatory? We also see, for example, you might have tried it out and you ask it a question. For example, a couple of days ago, I asked it about abortion. And then I get as a response, I'm sorry, this is a topic I cannot say anything about. It's too sensitive or something like that. So these things happen. So who decides that abortion is something that this chatbot cannot talk about, right? Or if you go into really normative, sensitive topics like the war, or in the case of the elections, for example. Sometimes somebody decides that your chatbot is not able to talk about these topics to you, and that can go into really problematic situations, and especially for vulnerable communities who are already underrepresented when the dominant tech companies decide what we can and cannot talk about. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, you brought up a lot of interesting points that are actually going to be talked about later in a panel. So hopefully you can watch the recording of that later since you can't be here in person. But yeah, I think you brought up an important point with the training data, where I saw one post by DeepSeek where it was saying, tell me a list of LGBTQ violations in the US, and it gave a pretty thorough answer, and it asked the same for China, and it redirected. So I think having transparency, like open source, but also transparency on what data is being used to train can also go into making these systems safer, again, like you said, before the black box closes.
Yeah, and if I may jump on that a little bit more. So a lot of talk and a lot of attention is indeed on the data, which is really important. But we also need to have more attention, I think, and more awareness about how does the system translate the prompt that I'm putting in? Because people ask it, again, Inès, I'm sorry, I haven't seen your documentary yet, so I'm really curious what kind of things you also asked them about. So and how do they communicate, right? So if I ask it something, it gets redirected and it gets structured within the model, and it gives then an output. And I don't know if this is really the output that I was asking. I don't know if that makes sense, but there are really different steps within the system where there are frictions that we need to have more attention to, where it can become biased or discriminatory.
Thank you for that. Super interesting. So shifting to the role of AI in design, if AI works for empowerment or manipulation, want to end on an optimistic note if possible. So Kathleen, since you work in co-design, what co-design methods ensure that AI companionship tools are equitable and beneficial rather than exploitative?
Another
loaded question,
but loaded
right?
question, yeah. I would definitely, yeah, I am not an expert on all the different, I can't say, and again, I know I keep saying this, but there is not one single method, but what I do in my work in particular is really focus on using methods that empower youth, for example, as co-designers, and actually more from a perspective where they are consulting based on their lived experience. So use as experts by experience to then inform the design of these tools. So what I do a lot in my work is have youth create personas of typical kind of fictional characters that are not meant to be definitive for a developer to then think, okay, I'm going to create a chatbot now based on this fictional character, but more as a generative tool where based on the information that they're putting into the character, like the types of hobbies, schedules, concerns, needs, and narratives that they're putting in there, this is a way for researchers to be able to understand what matters and what's salient for youth, for example, because it's impossible for researchers to know the appropriate variables that should be used for tailoring any sort of AI devices, including companions. So instead, we're seeing youth or end users as consultants where we should be the ones analyzing their narratives and being deductive from what they share with us rather than the other way around is one way I think we can create tools that are more relevant and engaging for people.
I think that's really important too, like putting an emphasis on the interdisciplinary perspective of it, because I think a lot of times those who create these technologies don't necessarily have either that youth background or that ethical background. So directly consulting the youth on what's important to them and having them as a co-designer is really helpful. Do you think when it's a for-profit company, do you think that like certain motives may come into play, like for profit and everything? Do you think like youth's perspective can fully be there when for-profit companies need to think about the bottom line and profit structure? Or do you think they're like mental health mental health of children and child protection would still be prioritized?
I think it also depends on the company.
Right? Lots of news lately. So.
Lots of news lately, yeah. And I'm sorry, I cannot give an answer. I think it really depends, because there are companies that are doing a lot of good work where they're not just focused on profit, where they do want to bring value. But I think this goes again to who is defining what the value is. And that's why I really commend a lot of companies now who have youth boards, for example, where they're truly valuing the perspectives of these youth as consultants to the actual direction of the company. Because I think it's only by involving them directly in these kind of decisions, even if they're commercial, because sometimes these commercial decisions may also benefit the youth if it is something that they believe is the case. So I think we just need to involve and put these individuals more at the decision-making table. That's the only way.
Definitely. I agree with that. So Freyja, going back to you, since you work a lot in speculative design as well, so speculative design and future thinking allows us to anticipate AI's impact in a sense. So what insights do you think they can provide about the risks and opportunities for artificial intimacy?
So I love speculative design and the previous speaker, Kathleen, right? Already explained very well, I think, the power that speculation and imagination brings. Also to ensure that we indeed have multiple voices, we allow different perspectives. And for me, what speculative design does is it gets people together. You can get like different stakeholders together, people from industry, people from policy, young people, different generations, and just ask them, what if in 10 years we will all have an AI companion? What would society look like? And then even pressuring them a little bit further and ask, what do you want? What would the best future society look like? And this kind of helps people to take off their business hat or their policy hat and to just really sit down and just really feel and imagine, what society do I want? What are my values? What are my hopes? What are my dreams? And then the power of speculative design is you to get together and you co-create something, right? So what would my ideal AI companion look like? So not what is already on the market, but really what would it look like? And then, of course, the power of and the role for me, why I use it in my own work a lot. What could possibly go wrong? Because a critique on law and on lawmakers is always, oh, you are always behind the technology. Okay, so how do we get in front of the technology? How do we get more innovative in law as well? Is really by sitting down and just imagine if everybody would have their own AI agent going online, organizing their whole life. What could possibly go wrong? It doesn't mean that we can predict what will go wrong, but if we don't even try and figure out a few scenarios and get people involved who are not usually involved in these discussions, that is so powerful, and that will also help us become more resilient, because we do live in amazing, crazy times with wicked problems that and things just happen so fast. But I do sometimes think if we thought about it a little bit more, we could have avoided a lot of problems. I mean, if I can give you just one more example, and then I'll hand it back again. I'm still baffled about surveillance and the problems with cameras not being able to work very well on people with non-white skin, right? So it's like, if you're working on machine vision, do you not know that there are more people who are not white? How can you say that your system works when you haven't even tried it? So it took, I think she was a student at the time, to flag that up, to say, hey, it's not working on my skin. So could this not have been avoided? Could you not have seen that maybe if you want to use facial recognition, that you need to train it on all faces? Is that so strange? So yeah, I'm sorry, then that's just a little pet peeve of me that I'm always, yeah, anyway. So yeah, it's very powerful. It's also very powerful because I do a lot of research on this, and I organize workshops on this. A lot of people feel they don't have control over their data. They feel they have no power. They feel like these companies are taking my data. They're doing stuff. I have no say. That is, pardon my language, BS. The future is open. If COVID has shown us anything, is that anything is possible. No, you cannot work from home. We had COVID, everybody worked from home. No, you cannot do this. No, you cannot. We had COVID, you could do a lot of things. So the future is open. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Let's make it better.
I really like your insights there. And yeah, I think there's a lot we can learn from the past when developing technologies to make it better for the future. One final question for now before we open it up to audience questions. Inès, I wanted to ask you, since we have a perspective of academia and research, I think within this exhibition we're really seeing the importance of art in telling these stories. So as an artist and filmmaker yourself, I wanted to ask, how can storytelling and art challenge or reinforce the ways that AI is designed for intimacy?
Yeah, so I think that it's kind of a conclusion of everything we said about reinventing our future and how we want, for instance, AI companions to be. I think that, as Freyja said before, about how we talk to those chatbots and we don't know how they are trained, where the data comes from, and we may talk to a coder or someone like that, or we don't even know if there is some morality and if the governments start to regulate the data, then maybe there will be some also political morality inside our AI companions. And I think that most of the AI companion are responding to a form of perfect companion that we invented also in science fiction, and how we build it from what we want in a perfect answering machine. And maybe if we try in filmmaking, but also in art in general, to invent some other forms of AI companion, then art can also influence coders and influence the way we are going to deal with the creation of technology of tomorrow. And so that it won't be a bubble. Maybe it can be like a chatbot that talks to all the family, to a group of friends, and so it will be open to a more open bubble. And maybe it's just not only for us, but for others. I don't know. I don't know, but I think that if we start writing story of new technology, new way of using technology, then maybe it will influence the people that we cannot reach because they are in the US or somewhere building chatbots, and they are maybe influenced by art, because I think that art has a lot of power in imagining the future of technology. And so we can give them some clues of how, and not only that, not only for those people, but also for the people that are watching art and that are reading and that wants to just take interest in those subjects. I think that we can also write stories about how to react and how to face those technology, and how to be aware of when sometimes it's political, sometimes it's not moral, sometimes blah blah blah, and sometimes it's too moral, blah blah. And so I think that art has a big influence on how we're gonna deal with the future and how we're gonna build it.
I really like what you said too about art having the power to reimagine future technologies. I think that's really interesting, and I think we're seeing that a lot here too, where we see technology integrated in different aspects of human intimacy from the 60s, 70s up until now and in the future. So thank you all very much. I wanted to open it up to any audience questions, if there's any. If there's any dying question you want to ask any of the panelists. No. All right, well, thank you all very much for coming to this panel. I think we had some very interesting insights about how youth are impacted and how we can redesign going forward, and making sure that youth are involved in the process of creating these technologies and making sure that their perspectives are valued and cherished within this process. We have more exciting things to come today, so feel free to take a look around and be back here soon. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye, Guan.